The entire universe, every electron, proton, atom, every star and galaxy, was born out of a singularity that brought about our whole existence. The Big Bang, an isolated moment in space and time, created something out of nothing. For eons we didn't know much about the universe, but through advancements in science and technology, we're now able to travel back in time, right to the point just after the Big Bang to finally piece together its entire story. And in the next 10 minutes, I'll be sharing that story with you. To be able to understand the history of our universe, we have to start at the beginning of time, and time itself was born with the Big Bang. Contrary to what its name might suggest, the Big Bang was not an explosion. It can more precisely be described as the rapid expansion of space and time in all directions, releasing immense amounts of radiation. In 1964, two Americans, astronomer Robert Wilson and astrophysicist Arno Penzias, stumbled upon a cryptic message traveling from the moment of creation itself. Their antenna in New Jersey picked up an odd buzzing sound that puzzled them. After eliminating all possible sources of interference, Wilson and Penzias figured out that they had just discovered the cosmic microwave background, or CMB, the thermal echo of the universe's explosive birth, and the most crucial piece of evidence for the Big Bang. Thanks to this ancient message, we know our universe came into existence 13.7 billion years ago, and it immediately began expanding at an exponential rate. This is known as the inflation epoch. When it was less than a blink of an eye old, like a billionth of a trillionth of a second old, our universe underwent an astounding growth spurt faster than the speed of light. Within a fraction of a second, it doubled in size at least 90 times. But as it expanded, the energy released became more diluted. In just 3 minutes, the universe had cooled down enough to allow the first particles of matter to form, and the first light elements were created. Neutrons and protons began colliding with each other and formed hydrogen, helium, and lithium. Though the particles were formed, the intense heat from the moment of creation made it too hot for light to shine, and so our universe was plunged into a cosmic dark age for hundreds of millions of years. Space was desolate and devoid of any planets, galaxies, or stars. Then the age of re-ionization began, and light finally emerged from the darkness with the birth of the universe's first stars, known as population 3 stars. These are believed to be made of the only ingredients available in the universe at the time: hydrogen, helium, and lithium. These stars are time capsules rich with information about our universe's earliest days, and with the James Webb Space Telescope, we can now look into them with greater detail than ever before. About 1 billion years after the Big Bang, galaxies began to appear, and there are two theories on how they first came into existence. The first suggests that big clouds of gas and dust collapsed under their own gravitational pull, allowing stars to form and eventually galaxies. The second, which has gained momentum in recent years, suggests that galaxies formed when small lumps of matter kept clumping and swirling together until they eventually grew to the size we're familiar with today. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is roughly 13.6 billion years old and contains between 100 to 400 billion stars, and spans about 100,000 light years across. Astronomers are still working on charting the spiral structure of our galaxy. Although using infrared images from NASA's Spitzer Space Telescope, we've discovered that it is dominated by two arms wrapping off the ends of a central band of stars. Stars and galaxies are still being created to this day, and astronomers estimate that there could be as many as 2 trillion galaxies spiraling through the black ocean of our universe. 4.5 billion years ago, a dense cloud of interstellar gas and dust kept swirling together. As gravity pulled more and more material into the center, the pressure in the core was so great that hydrogen atoms began to form to make helium, releasing immense amounts of energy. This process eventually gave birth to the star we see every morning when we wake up, our sun. Once the sun was formed, the matter surrounding it clustered into spheres and fell into its gravitational pull, creating the planets in our solar system. The giant planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, were the first to circle the sun. As it began emitting its light, the smaller planets Mercury, Venus, Mars, and our very own Earth formed. Our planet just happened to orbit the sun in what scientists call the Goldilocks zone, the perfect temperature and distance from the sun to allow for liquid water to exist. Somewhere between 60 to 175 million years after our solar system was born, a Mars-sized planet collided with Earth, and the post-impact debris morphed together to give us our moon. Talk about upcycling. Life in our universe seems to be far from inevitable. Everywhere we point our telescopes end up seeing the same thing: bright nebulae, star clusters, and ominous galaxies that all look desolate and lifeless. But when it comes to our home planet, the story is very different. Life on Earth first appeared 3.7 billion years ago, but how it sprung into existence is still a hot topic of debate. Many believe the first living organisms were microscopic microbes that left signals of their presence in rocks. Others think life started in a primordial soup deep in the ocean through vents in the seabeds, where the interaction between water and rocks provided enough chemical energy to allow the first unicellular organisms to emerge. Whichever side of the argument you're on, though, the one thing that's certain is that the Earth was teeming with life long before we showed up. We came onto the cosmic scene just around 6 million years ago. A long time for sure, but minuscule when compared to the 13.7 billion year lifespan of the universe. Although our early ancestors joined the party late, we've moved quicker than we could have ever imagined. In just a short span of time, we've gone from hunter-gatherers to cosmic explorers preparing to create a base on the moon's surface. Our telescopes now allow us to see further than we've ever been able to before, and our questions are bigger than we've ever dared to ask. But even with all the tools available to us, there are things in the universe that are still shrouded in mystery. Around 85% of our universe is made up of a mysterious substance that we have never seen. In 1933, Swiss astronomer Fritz Zwicky measured the visible mass of a cluster of galaxies and found that it was too small to prevent these galaxies from escaping the gravitational pull of the cluster. Zwicky concluded that something must be acting like glue holding the cluster together. That mysterious substance we now describe as dark matter, a completely invisible material that fills up our universe and acts as an astronomically potent superglue. Without dark matter, the behavior of stars, planets, and galaxies would just not make sense, and our universe would not have evolved the way it has. And then there's dark energy, the strange force that is pulling our universe apart at an ever-increasing speed. Just like dark matter, dark energy is invisible, but its powerful effects are largely felt.
And liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope, our window on the universe.
In 1920, Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe is not static, but is still expanding. And in 1998, the telescope named after the astronomer proved him right. And even more, that the universe was expanding at an accelerated rate. We have since discovered that dark energy is the reason for this expansion, and also why stars and galaxies recede away from each other. While much about the formation of the universe and its evolution has been theorized and plotted on the cosmic timeline, there are still enduring questions to be answered. With telescopes like Webb, we'll continue to hunt for the elusive dark matter, as well as look back into our universe to understand the evolution of stars and the formation of galaxies. Our quest also includes searching the cosmos in hopes of finding life forms to share our existence with. During the search, we've discovered exoplanets that orbit around a star outside of our solar system. Based on NASA's Kepler Space Telescope imagery, we can confidently assume that every star in the universe has at least one planet orbiting around it. In our galaxy of hundreds of billions of stars, it's believed that there are trillions of exoplanets. Yet we've only discovered around 3,900 of them. A little more than 4 light-years away, Proxima Centauri is the closest of these exoplanets, but scientists have their eyes on bigger things with the TRAPPIST-1 star system. This star system is home to 7 planets, all roughly the size of Earth, orbiting around a red dwarf around 40 light-years away. Our space telescopes, ground telescopes, and best scientists are working to try and understand whether any of these planets have the right ingredients for life to spring into existence. I made an entire video on what it would be like to live on one of these planets, the only one that scientists believe could possibly hold life. Whether we succeed in this mission is a story that will be written in the universe's future. One that will either propel us forward towards the understanding of the cosmos and our place in it, or will leave us pondering our lonely existence. Our universe is currently 93 billion light-years wide, filled with trillions of galaxies, and 1 septillion stars, that's 24 zeros, and it's still expanding through the vastness of space. Sometime in the distant future, it's estimated that our Milky Way will collide with the neighboring Andromeda galaxy. Because though the universe is expanding, galaxies are receding away from each other, and the proximity of the 2 galaxies will make the collision inevitable. Don't worry though, we'll be long gone before that happens. 100 billion years into the future, galaxies will disappear, and eventually, our universe will be populated by black holes ravenously eating away all that is in their way. As a new dark age sets upon our universe, astronomers believe that its fate is bound to end the same way that it began. With time, space will begin contracting again, the universe will shrink in size until one day, it devolves back into the singularity that started it all. A sort of Big Crunch reversal, that'll bring things full circle and leave behind an emptiness aching to be filled. And then, who knows? Bang.
Life is a brief moment between two unknowns. We don't know where we came from, and we can't prove where we'll end up. All we truly have is this moment and what we leave behind. Our legacy. That's what lasts. Through the stories we tell, the battles we fight, and the things we choose to build. That's why I love the sponsor of today's episode, Heroes of History. Heroes of History is a free-to-play mobile game that builds on this exact idea. It reimagines some of the greatest minds, warriors, and mythological legends from across time. People like Einstein, Nikola Tesla, Cleopatra, and brings them to life in a way that's exciting, but still positive and respectful. The game features a time travel storyline led by Einstein and Tesla themselves, and the gameplay combines city building, hero collection, and real-time battles, all in one experience. What I love is how it captures something deeply human. The need to grow, to adapt, and to stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. Every hero has a story, and every battle is a lesson in timing, planning, and perspective. Your success will depend on picking the right hero for the right task, because they all have different classes, abilities, and roles in battle. For example, you might not want to take Marie Curie into battle, although who knows what she's really capable of. I would love to hear the heroes that you unlock in the comments down below. The best thing about the game is it's free to play, whether as a mobile game or right in your browser with no downloads required. The team is also constantly updating the game with new heroes, events, minigames, and features, so there's always something new to explore. So download Heroes of History for free right now by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen right now. Join forces with friends in alliances or compete against other players in multiplayer battles. Tell beautiful stories, win battles, and build a legacy that stands the test of time.
From sharing the Earth with many other human species merely as hunter-gatherers trying to brave the elements, to building rockets, creating the internet, and now with our eyes set on Mars, the history of humanity is one that's filled with determination, cooperation, and ingenuity. We have done so much more for ourselves than our ancestors could have ever imagined. Today, humans dominate contemporary life on Earth, but we haven't always been this powerful. So how did we get here? What's our story? This is the entire history of humanity in 10 minutes. Our story begins around 200,000 years ago with the emergence of our species, Homo sapiens. At the time, we shared our world with several other human species or hominins. The most well-known are Homo erectus, the upright man, and Homo neanderthalensis, commonly referred to as Neanderthals. The scientific consensus is that we all come from a common ancestor, the first species of the Homo genus, that evolved approximately 2.5 million years ago. The genes of these hominins suggest that they cross paths and even occasionally interbred. Sadly, for the last 15,000 years, we've been the only human species to walk this earth, which raises the question, what happened to the rest of us? The scientific debate concerning the cause of extinction of all other hominid species is far from over. Some theories attribute their demise to rapid changes in local climate, while others lean towards a more aggressive explanation, with mass graves and cracked skulls found at archaeological sites as backup evidence. Another possibility is that they didn't go extinct at all, but rather that we all merged into one species through interbreeding. Whatever the real course is, there's only one species of humans left today, Homo sapiens. For many millennia, humans were just another link in the food chain, another stop in the circle of life. Bipedal primates that were no more significant than other species participating in the ecosystem. So what changed? What allowed us to become the only known species to successfully migrate and adapt to a wide variety of ecosystems across our planet, fundamentally change global climate, and even venture into space? This development didn't happen overnight. It took tens of thousands of years, and what exactly transpired is something that we'll never know for sure. But historians have generally agreed on a few major landmarks in our prehistory that stand out above all others. Striding bipedal locomotion was novel for primates roaming the prehistoric African savanna, but though it did free up early hominins' arms for other tasks, it didn't yet give them a significant edge over other species in their ecosystem for millions of years to come. What did forever change our place in the food chain, though, was the use of fire. The first evidence for hominin interactions with one of the most destructive forces of nature dates back to around 1.5 million years ago. We started out by adding fuel to naturally occurring fires to keep them burning. It would take us around another million years for us to start creating fires on our own, which enabled its habitual use. And once we figured it out, everything changed. The mastery of fire by hominin species was extremely useful for many different reasons. We used it to provide warmth when the weather went cold, light when the sky turned dark, protection against predators and insects, and best of all, we used it to cook our meals. By cooking food, Richard Wrangham posits in his cooking hypothesis that our bodies required less energy for digestion, which allowed for more energy to be allocated to different functions of the brain. This, Wrangham believes, is what eventually led to the development of complex language. According to Israeli scientist Noah Harari, though, it wasn't only our fiery ways that set Homo sapiens apart from all other species. He believes there was something else, the cognitive revolution. Around 70,000 years ago, we developed the capacity for large-scale collaboration through the ability to communicate complex information. The cause is uncertain, most likely a chance gene mutation, but the effect was unparalleled. Many species communicate to each other about an imminent threat or the desire to mate, but during the cognitive revolution, Harari argues that Homo sapiens started talking to each other about other members of the tribe in collective fictions like animist deities and spirits, which allowed even complete strangers to cooperate effectively. Who knew that gossiping would turn out to be one of our biggest strengths? Even today, the functioning of our societies completely depends on our belief in collective fictions like human rights, the value of money, and the law. Such belief systems bind millions of people to each other and, back then, made it possible for Homo sapiens to conquer the world. This development of complex language enabled Homo sapiens to move out of Africa into Europe and Asia, and eventually into Australia and America. The reason for this venture far away from home is unclear, but it was most likely environmental pressures like severe droughts and lack of food that pushed them out. Their migration was far from peaceful though. Due to hunting and competition for resources, it led to the extinction of a lot of endemic megafauna. Then, around 12,000, something incredible happened. Theorized to have occurred in multiple different locations around the world simultaneously, humans decided to start cultivating plants and breeding animals for food, essentially changing us from nomads to settlers, from hunter-gatherers to farmers. As a result, food supply stabilized and acquiring nourishment wasn't a full-time occupation for every member of the tribe anymore. This allowed some members of the tribe enough time to specialize in other kinds of labor. We can now have artisans, warriors, and child caregivers. With time, these settlements grew into cities and cities into empires, often united under collective religious fictions. This ensued the development of culture, customs, traditions, and, perhaps most importantly, written text. The emergence of written text distinguishes prehistory, defined by scholars as the period before written records, from history, defined as the period after. While prehistory is primarily based on interpretations from archaeological findings, our understanding of history is mostly dictated by written records. The oldest written records we found to date were discovered in Egypt and are estimated to be 5,000 years old. The ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations are said to be the cradles of society as we know it. Sadly, the human story would not be complete without some of the biggest atrocities the Earth has ever seen. While large-scale collaboration of humans under common beliefs led to some of our greatest achievements, it also had terrible consequences such as wars, genocide, and enslavement. Why does this unrivaled capacity for teamwork carry with it such a devastating power? The flip side of our collective fiction's potential to unite is its power to separate, or rather, unite against. Competition for resources is a natural phenomenon, but it had never before been as organized and ruthless as under human civilization. The belief in, for instance, a deity, the divinity of a ruler or national superiority, became a strong enough motivator to wish death upon groups of people with opposing beliefs or different identities. English philosopher Thomas Hobbes argues that humans are inherently self-interested and competitive, and that we can both control our brutish nature by subjecting ourselves to rigid authoritative bodies who maintain peace. Genevievan philosopher Rousseau counters this by saying that we're not biologically wired to coexist in numerous groups, and large-scale civilizations inevitably breed extreme inequality and social division and eventually collapse. He believes our good nature is corrupted by political and social institutions, which reward selfish desires that would have been kept in check by smaller-sized prehistoric communities of hunters and gatherers. Either way, the intricate web of human interactions that constitutes contemporary society is unrecognizable and undeniably more complex compared to the way our genetically indistinguishable prehistoric ancestors organized themselves, and this has led to issues beyond our control. We could fill dozens of videos with human accomplishments from the past few thousand years. From the construction of the pyramids to the invention of mathematics, from Greek politics to the morals of Confucianism, from Buddhist wisdom to Roman infrastructure. But looking at modern history, one development in particular stands out: the scientific revolution. This method of systematic experimentation originated in Europe and radically changed our understanding of the universe, our planet, and ourselves. Empirical observations replaced superstitions as the framework we use to interpret the world around us. During the 18th century, also referred to as the Age of Enlightenment, religious doctrines were replaced by a thirst for reason in order to improve the human condition. Together with the flood of groundbreaking discoveries and innovations that resulted from this age, came a reinterpretation of our relationship with nature. This is exemplified by French philosopher, scientist, and mathematician René Descartes, who a few centuries earlier proclaimed our progression in different scientific fields could and should make us masters and possessors of nature. This paradigm shift, in combination with previously unimaginable technological advancement, gave rise to what is referred to as the Industrial Revolution, and ushered into an era of not only unprecedented productivity and discovery, but also unprecedented exploitation of the natural world and human labor. According to economic anthropologist Jason Hickel, the most important driver of this mass exploitation was an economic system that demands perpetual expansion. He argues that the rise of capitalism required the destruction of self-sufficient, subsistence economies and the creation of artificial scarcity and cheap labor. An example of this were the Enclosure Acts, a series of acts proposed by the British Parliament between 1604 and 1914, in which the state essentially enclosed previously common land and converted it to private property. As a result, a lot of local people lost access to land that had been available to them for generations, and were left with no other choice than to offer their labor to a landowner or move to the city. This desire for economic expansion wasn't limited to appropriation of the commons within national borders, but is expected to have driven European colonization of most of the world. Oxford economist Kate Raworth argues that an economic system that depends on infinite growth is completely unsustainable, considering a planetary system with finite resources. If the global economy grows at 3% per year, which is relatively low, economic activity would double every 24 years. Since GDP growth is coupled to material and energy use, it significantly contributes to the climatic disruption and immense pressure on planetary boundaries that the productivity of the Industrial Revolution has brought with it. And while we have proceeded further than ever in fields like healthcare, food production, or even astronomy, under this growth paradigm, Raworth suggests it's not essential to improving human welfare and scientific discovery. In her book Donut Economics, she puts forth that expanding the commons or public services, essentially reversing the privatization of the last few centuries, and a reinterpretation of the natural ecosystem and our place within it, provide a stronger foundation for human life and nature to flourish. Humanity's past is one that's filled with a lot of incredible achievements. Thousands of years have now passed since we first walked the earth, and our world would be completely unimaginable to our prehistoric ancestors. But we must keep in mind that in our conquest for growth, we don't destroy the very thing that gave us life and an opportunity to thrive. We must take care of nature, just as it took care of us in the past. Here's to humanity's future. Let's hope that it's one the ancient hominids would have been proud of.
We've just gone through the journey of life itself, from the birth of the universe to the rise of human civilization, billions of years before us, hundreds of thousands of years with us. But it can be really difficult to put all that into perspective, so now we'll zoom in. From the story of an entire world and the history of humankind to the journey of just one, someone like you or me. This next chapter isn't about nations or empires, it's about you and I. This is the journey of human existence.
Consciousness. It's our awareness, our understanding, our ignorance. Our daily consciousness leaves out more than it takes in. And due to this, it leaves out important things. Things that would help relieve us if we knew them. If we had a higher awareness, a better consciousness, we would feel better. We would be more at peace with things. The deep down truth of things is screened by our consciousness. Our sensory organs will pick things out. Our eyes can only see certain things, our ears can only hear certain things. We have to create instruments and other tools to see things we as humans cannot, to expand our understanding and thus our ego, or consciousness. Humans evolved and became the dominant species on Earth by a long shot. It's due to our innate ability to network with each other. If humanity was wiped out and restarted, like loading an old save file, communities would still form. Structures within society are inevitable due to the variety of brains. Some are good at critical thinking, others are more artistic. However, we are all wired with some innate features. Just as humans form societies that evolve, other creatures do as well. But we're different. We are customizable characters, basically. We can kind of mold ourselves into whatever kind of person we want to be. We can't know for certain that animals or any other life on Earth is conscious or can even function in the same way that we do. Let's put it this way. I know that I have my own thoughts and feelings and emotions, but how can I know for certain that you or anyone else does? There's no way I can go to your head and see things 100% from your perspective. I can't know what you're thinking, or if you can even think in the first place. To truly understand the universe, to understand and actually experience life, you have to give yourself up. There's no point in sustaining bliss, in being permanently at an all-time high. The life you're living is what you have put yourself into, what ego you've formed, only you don't want to admit it. You want to believe it happened to you. Day to day, you play non-bliss in order to be able to experience bliss. You put yourself into bad situations, you let in the negative experiences in life just to feel some kind of satisfaction when it goes the other way. Self implies other, white implies black, death implies life. You can feel your existence as fundamental, not as an accident. At the basic level, at the lowest level imaginable, you are the fundamentals of existence. The same thing that makes you is the same thing that makes up everything else. If you can step back from what you believe, if you can step back from what your sensory organs have turned you into, you start to see things for what they actually are. Do you define yourself as a victim of the world, or as the world? Love is only possible due to the lack of self. You give up all your secrets, the walls you've built to keep people at an arm's distance slowly lower, one by one, until you're a completely open book, until all your pages have been read, and the rest of the pages are blank, waiting to be filled with this newfound love. In basketball, or soccer, or football, you're constantly giving the ball to someone else. The point of the game is to have the ball in your hand for the least amount of time, to constantly be passing it to someone else, to shoot it, to get it out of your hands. It keeps the game going, and life is the same way. If you define yourself, you, as only being what your ego is, as the things you do voluntarily, then you're the victim. It's because of some higher power that you were put here when you didn't ask for it. But what about the things you do involuntarily? Do you beat your heart, or does it just happen to you? You do those things, even though you don't know how. Words don't work here. As Alan Watts said, everyone is fundamentally the alternate reality. Not God in a traditional sense, but God in the sense of being the self, the deep down basic whatever there is. And you're all that. Only you're pretending you're not. A mind that can ask, who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of all of this? Tends to forget. As I said, your consciousness tends to leave out critical information at times. A consciousness that can view the world and take in sensory information tends to forget what's behind those eyes. A mind that hasn't gone deep enough to find where those questions come from. Because the same place those questions come from is the same place those answers lie. The brain controls everything. In order to go to the extremes of the universe, to places we can only dream of going, we must first dive deep into something that is all inside of us. Take the Big Bang, for example. Now there's hundreds, thousands of theories as to how we came into existence, but let's go with this one. You believe that you are strictly you. Your human body is all that you are and all that you have ever been. You're simply a small speck of dust in a vast sea of galaxies, stars, planets. You're irrelevant. But rolling back the clock, things get smaller. The universe was more compact. The atoms that make you up are building blocks of the universe, of the hot gas clouds that form stars, that allowed solar systems to form, that allowed planets like Earth to form. If you keep rolling back this clock, you were around at the very instant everything came into existence. That is you too. When everything was infinitesimally small, you were there. But we define ourselves as being only us, mere humans walking on a planet that we didn't ask to get put on. But frankly, every one of us somehow made this happen. We just go on and pretend we didn't. It's because of how we define ourselves. Are you the victim, or are you the world? As cringy as it may sound, everyone you meet is just a small packet of the universe. A present, whether they're a pleasant one or not, that was packaged together from billions of years of engineering and architecture on a universal scale. But instead, we define ourselves as something completely separate from it, something not connected whatsoever, which is a foolish view. We tend to search for how the universe came into being, but we're just the universe trying to understand itself. In order to get to that conclusion, we have to reframe our mindset. We're not as different as we all think. Your name is given to you at birth. Your ideas and personality are collected from the world. Scraps, bits and pieces here and there cling to you like a magnet. So what part of you is you? We are all different manifestations of consciousness, but we are all fundamentally the same thing. We all may have different egos, different personalities, but when you step back, drop the ego, we are all connected. View the universe as a forest. Every one of us is a twig, a leaf, a branch. But together, we form life. Our origin, our roots, are connected together. Just as the roots of trees form a vast network which brings these massive forests to life, humanity's roots all come from the same place. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred from one form of energy to another. But many of us have this fear that it's all going to come to an end. And while yes, your life will end, your energy will not. It will continue onward, forever. But our consciousness has convinced us otherwise. We form this thought process, almost like we've been hypnotized, to think that we are all there is and all there ever will be, and that it's all going to come to an end. This leaves us unsatisfied and unhappy. But the universe is continuous, and you are technically the universe, so you will continue on as well. Your death is not the end of you, it's the death of your ego. Many people experience the same exact thing while living. Ego death. It tends to be induced through psychedelic drugs, LSD, shrooms, the list goes on. While working on this video, I actually experienced it myself, and although not intentional, it provided clarity in a way I've never before experienced. It's not the ego in the vernacular sense, as describing a person's self-worth. It's the philosophical ego. It's the complete loss of subjective self-identity. Everything that you believe you are will disappear. You're void of emotion, of connection to anything around you, of connection to what makes you, you. The idea of being a person doesn't make any sense. The words I, me, and myself have zero meaning whatsoever. The world can normally be put into two categories, myself and not myself. While experiencing ego death, this line is blurred. I am completely gone. There's only the awareness of existence. The lifetime accumulation of your thoughts and emotions are put on pause. It's as if you're on a cliff approaching an infinite void beneath you. Your life is continuous and exists all the way up the mountain until you reach the edge. Beneath you, though, is the unknown. Ego death is jumping into that void, leaving behind everything you've ever known. It's as if you've stepped out of your body into a separate entity. You start to see things for what they actually are, but things don't actually exist. Things is just a noun, it's a fragment of speech. And speech is just another instrument we've created to try and understand the world around us. Our senses allow us to go about our daily lives and traverse the world, but they don't really offer any explanations, so we have to make them up ourselves. While experiencing ego death, you disconnect from all of that. You have a heightened awareness. It's truly as if you're experiencing a higher level of consciousness that no person can understand. You reach this level that words can't explain. The instruments we made to try and understand our place in the universe shatter completely. Explaining it in terms of I saw or I felt don't seem reasonable. Our languages are instruments created to explain things that someone experiences. But while undergoing ego death, there is no someone. There is no me. So how do you describe it? It's as if your slate was wiped clean, your character's save file was corrupted, but you're still in the game. Because of this, ego death can be scary. But it can also be a very enlightening experience. It's both constricting and freeing. It's white and black. It's like you're defining what life is like through experiencing death. We cannot be more sensitive and welcoming to pleasure without being more sensitive and accepting to pain. You're flying and sinking at the same time, being pulled from below, and above, in every direction, at once. While going through it, I ended up reaching a moment of acceptance. Ego death, while often extremely anxiety-inducing, offers a glimpse into a reality free of that. A life free of your personal flaws, your daily thoughts, your responsibilities. It personally feels as if time is frozen, and wherever your mind wanders is free to judge things as they truly are. You are the observer and the observable. Surprisingly, the conclusion I came to is the same conclusion I came to while making a previous video of mine. and it's that nothing in life really matters. Fear in general tends to come from us not being able to make peace with the chaos that is the universe, not being able to cope with the idea of entropy, that everything is tending towards disorder. Forming an ego is disorderly in the same way. You go further and further down your own tunnel and stray further from everyone else. Experiencing ego death is breaking out of that tunnel, pulling back, and understanding that the network of these tunnels that encompass every human on Earth all eventually return back to the same place. When I die, when my ego is completely gone forever, when my physical body breaks down and no longer resembles the form it's in today, I'll still somehow be here. Right now, I'm an hourglass. The sand is slowly leaking its way to the bottom, and eventually it'll all be there. It's the end of the line for me. But when that day comes, the universe will stop by, take the hourglass, flip it over, and whatever made me will then become something entirely different. We're all just a temporary collection of atoms, and whatever you and I subjectively believe we are won't last forever. But objectively, we will. For now, just enjoy the ride. For the past month or so, I've been thinking a lot about life, and when people say that, they usually mean what they want to do in life, whether that be their career, or relationships, or entertainment, or leisure. But I've been thinking differently. Of course, I've been thinking about those things, but I've also been thinking about how much of your life is really yours. How much of your life is really being lived to its full potential. Are you living, or are you just existing? On average, you're gonna get about 79 years on this big rock called Earth. If you live in Monaco, it's closer to 90. If you live in Chad, you'll be lucky to get 50. Regardless, we don't get 79 years of freedom. We have responsibilities and things that we can't ignore. Most importantly, our bodies. Assuming you sleep 8 hours a night on average, about a third of your life, or 26 years, is going to be spent sleeping. So right away, we're down from 79 to 53. But it doesn't stop there. Chances are if you're watching this video, you're going to or have gone to school. In the United States, you'll go for at least 12 years. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for 36 weeks a year. This amounts to 17,280 hours spent just inside the school building. But wait, we also have to factor in homework and out-of-school activities, among other things. So, this is more like 22,000 to 25,000 hours, or about 3 years of your life. If you go to college or university afterwards, make it 5 years instead. We're down to 48 years. Well, all this schooling and money you spent getting a degree has to be put to some use, right? Chances are you'll try and get a job in the field of whatever it is your degree is in. It'll probably be a full-time job, so you'll be working 40-hour weeks pretty regularly, if not more than that. Let's say you get 2 weeks of vacation per year. The average person works for about 40 to 50 years of their life, so we'll just go with the average and say 45. Over your entire life, you'll work on average about 90,000 hours, or about 10 years of your life. We have 38 years left. Wait, depending on where you live, your commute to work will vary. You might drive yourself, you might walk, you might use an Uber or a taxi. Regardless, your commute to and from work, on average, takes about 1.5 hours a day. Adding this up over your entire working career, it amounts to 17,520 hours, or about 2 years of your life. 36 years left. All of this work and studying really builds up an appetite, so you should probably spend some time eating. On an average day, we spend about 70 minutes just eating food to survive. In your 79 years of life, you'll spend about 32,000 hours just eating, or about 4 years of your life. Down to 32. Well, after you're done eating, you have to clean up and maybe do some chores around the house. On average, you spend about 1 hour a day doing tasks just around your house, cleaning up after you eat, washing dishes, doing laundry, showering, and plenty of other stuff. This amounts to nearly 29,000 hours over the course of your life, or about 3 years. 29 years left. Eventually, all of that food and water has to leave your body somehow. You'll spend about 3 months of your life just sitting on the toilet. Yeah. Of course, we also waste time, and we do it pretty well.
Over the course of our lifetimes, we'll spend about 115,000 hours on our phones, or about 13 years. This, of course, is just your phone. This doesn't include you watching TV, you playing games, among other things. 16 years left. Assuming you can afford to retire at the average age of 62, you'll spend the rest of your life living the luxuries of retirement, if you can still function properly. Over 50% of retired people over the age of 65 have some sort of disability, with 15% of those people having 3 or more. Chances are, if you are one of these people, you'll be in and out of medical care pretty often. So, those final 16 years of freedom you have, it's a coin flip. That doesn't exactly entail freedom. So overall, you have 1 year in your 79-year life to really and truly do what you want to do. But despite the age you might be, young or old, you may be nearing the end of your time with some of the most important people in your life. For example, while you're young and in school from the ages of 1 to 18, you'll most likely be spending nearly every day in the presence of your parents. After you finish your schooling, assuming your parents are in their mid-40s, we'll say they have about 30 years left in their life. The real world starts to set in. Your job, your possible relationships, your important things to do in life take priority. Eventually, if you leave your hometown, you'll only be seeing your parents around holidays and special occasions, maybe 10 days a year. So, 300 days left with the people who brought you into the world, whereas before you would see them almost every single day. You have already spent 95% of the time that you will ever spend with your parents in the first 18 years of your life. And now, you only have the remaining 5% for the rest of your life. At the end of the day, there's only one thing that matters, and that's your own happiness. What many people don't realize is that they do so many things in life just to try and succeed as opposed to fulfilling a purpose. They work a job they hate for 40 years just to make that extra $30,000 a year so they can afford a car that they only drive to work. It's temporary happiness, not genuine happiness. People go to school to become a doctor because their mom or their dad or somebody else told them to, not because they actually want to. I really hope that every single person watching this video gets insanely rich and famous so that they can finally realize that this isn't the point of life. The point is to be happy with what you're doing while you're doing it. Alright, sure, the 45 working years or however long you're working is going to be hard to get past. But what if you don't hate waking up every day to go to work? What if your work is your happiness? You see, life isn't a straight path. You can't map it out perfectly one-to-one. It just doesn't work like that. We spend every day planning on what we're going to do the next, instead of just taking in the day for what it actually is. Sure, we have to eat, duh, but what if we spend that time eating with friends or family, or just people who make your life better? Your commute to work might be long and tedious sometimes, but what if you spend that time listening to podcasts, or carpooling with coworkers and friends? The 13 years we waste on our phones might seem useless, but what if we use that time to build the business you've always wanted to, or build the brand you've always wanted, or make a YouTube channel to talk to people about the random ideas you get? You'll bring so much value to people that you never even thought was possible. Let's say you take care of yourself and regularly work out and eat decently well. Your chances of being healthy later in life is much more likely, and you'll have much more free time to master the things that you really want, whether that be a skill or just relationships with others. No matter what you or I or any person on this planet does, time doesn't stop for anyone. Time is the one thing you cannot get back. If you lose a lot of money, it's fine. You can get more. If your friend decides to turn their back on you, it's fine. There's millions of people out there in the same situation. But time, you can't get it back. Once it's gone, it's gone. How many days have you spent doing the same mundane tasks that you hate? And more importantly, when is it going to end? Life is about choices. Every choice you've ever made has led you to this exact moment watching this video. And given that you only have one life, at least in this universe, why not make your own decisions? So many people live life predicated on somebody else's opinion, which is dumb. People have so many barriers in life, but they aren't really about money, they aren't about time. They aren't about how you look, it's about opinions. Other people's opinions. probably about 90% of people are unhappy because they value someone else's opinion more than their own. When you're old and unable to do the things that you could have when you're younger, you'll regret. And regret hurts more than any breakup, failure, or anything else ever could. Life doesn't have to suck, you don't have to regret everything. That FOMO, or fear of missing out, is a poison. Instead of living trying to mimic people you see on Instagram or YouTube or social media, just live based on your own terms. Instead of just observing and living passively, really start to think about what you do with your time. Does that mean call your boss and tell him you quit? No. Does that mean drop out of school tomorrow? No. All it means is to truly decide what you want in life and put yourself in the right direction. It's not gonna happen overnight, that's not the point. There would be no journey then. As cliche as it sounds, your 79-year journey here is very short. Sure, it's technically the longest thing you'll ever do. But the universe is 13.8 billion years old. If the universe's history was condensed down into 24 hours, the world as we know it, with cars and airplanes and civilization as we know it, would only come into existence in the very last second. Block out any and all negativity in your life. And once you can truly realize that the only opinion that matters is your own, life can get pretty clear. And the noises inside your head get pretty quiet.
Live like you're dying, replied one of my friends a few weeks ago after I jokingly brought up the idea of dropping everything and moving to Portugal amidst our conversation about work stress. We both laughed the moment off, but I went home and that one line just kept ringing inside my head. What does it really mean to live like you're dying? For most people, including myself, when we hear statements like these, cool experiences flood our minds. Things like running a marathon or learning a new language or flying in a hot air balloon and being part of a flash mob. And while all of these things seem exciting, I just couldn't help but wonder. If I were on my deathbed, would the fact that I had gone skydiving or could speak French really bring me any peace? It seems like underneath our modern and somewhat glamorized understanding of what it means to live like we're dying lies much more sober and pragmatic questions that we rarely ever take the time to ask ourselves until circumstances leave us no choice. Imagine you wake up tomorrow with a minor headache, one of many you've been having recently. They've been manageable, so nothing alarming. It's probably nothing, you say to yourself, as you pop an Advil and get ready for the day. But by bedtime, the pain is just so unbearable that you have to go see a doctor. As you lie on the hospital bed facing the bright white lights flooding the entire room, your doctor walks in with a file in his hand and a very grim look on his face. He says to you that they found a brain tumor. That can't be, you say so to yourself. Just yesterday you were planning on taking a trip with your friends for the summer. To make matters worse, the doctor tells you there's nothing they can do about the tumor but manage it. It's terminal and you have less than 18 months. Walking out of the hospital with the realization of your own mortality staring you right in the face. In what ways would your perception about life and what matters change? This might not be the case for many of us, but the lessons in it are universal. How would you change the way you live your life day to day if you found out you only had 10 more years to live? How about 5 or 1 year or even 6 months? If you only had just 1 week left here on Earth, what would you cherish the most? These questions are intense, and it makes sense why people who are fortunate enough to be able to avoid them, for the most part, choose to do so. But what if the answer to our questions about what makes life meaningful lies not in the quality of our experiences, as we're so commonly told, but rather in the process of letting all of those experiences go? There may be no profession that grants a person a closer look into the experience of death than palliative care nursing. This caregiving approach aims to ease the suffering of patients with terminal illnesses. One palliative care nurse, Ronnie Ware, who assisted patients through the last 12 weeks of life, wrote in her book, The Top 5 Regrets of Dying, of the experiences she gathered from her patients in the face of mortality. The top 5 regrets were: I wish I let myself be happier. I wish I stayed in touch with my friends. I wish I had had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And most commonly, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. As I read through the list, what struck me the most was the second most common regret. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I found this regret so ironic because of how incompatible it is with the way that we, as not yet dying people, so commonly seek to derive meaning from our lives. The truth is that most of us don't have the privilege of working fulfilling jobs. Many of us are stuck in the rat race doing boring jobs with no altruistic value, just to fend for ourselves. There's only a handful of people who get to find fulfillment and meaning in their work. People like Paul Kalanithi, a neurosurgeon who was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer at the age of 36, during his last year of residency. Paul spent the final year of his life continuing to work as a surgeon, even when he was forced to stare at his own mortality in the face. In his novel, When Breath Becomes Air, Paul wrote, "I don't think I ever spent a minute of any day wondering why I did this work, or whether it was even worth it." The call to protect life, and not merely life, but another's identity, was obvious in its sacredness. He spent the last few months on Earth powering through excruciating pain to complete shifts that, at times, spanned multiple days and nights and required his non-stop focus. It's amazing that Paul was able to find meaning and fulfillment in his work as a neurosurgeon, but for many of us, we spend 40 hours every week working a job we wouldn't consider worth it in the final moments of life. The types of jobs that, on our deathbeds, we'll end up wishing we hadn't worked so hard at. The reality is that finding a career that provides both economic security and a personal sense of meaning is quite a difficult balance to strike, and maybe one that not everyone will be able to achieve. So then is all hope lost for us who cannot have meanings tied to our jobs and are forced to continue in our unfulfilling endeavors? Matthew Ricard, a renowned writer, philosopher, and Buddhist monk, once wrote, "We try to create outer conditions that we believe will make us happy, but it's the mind itself that translates outer conditions into happiness or suffering. This is why we can be deeply unhappy, even though we have it all, and conversely, we can remain strong and serene in the face of hardship." What if it wasn't the profession itself that gave Paul meaning in life? What if it was the way his mind translated his profession that gave him strength and serenity even in the final days of life? A recent survey in the United States found that around 1 in 5 physicians plan on leaving the practice within 2 years, while about 1 in 3 health professionals plan on at least reducing their workload within the next 12 months. So even in a profession that's altruistic in nature, there's still loads of people with a desire to quit, whether it's for stress-related reasons or simply because it doesn't fulfill them in the way they perhaps thought it would. Imagine again yourself with a terminal illness, except this time you're lying in a hospital bed experiencing the last few days of your life. It's been 18 months after the tumor was first discovered. In the past 6 months, the illness had progressed rapidly, causing more deterioration to your mobility, cognition, and overall identity than you ever would have imagined on the day of your initial diagnosis. The illness has left you with no choice but to gradually say goodbye to all of the activities that once brought you joy. Even simple everyday things like brewing yourself a pot of coffee in the morning or going on a spontaneous walk around the lake with a friend are long gone now. As you lay there in that bed listening to the beeping of the machines that are struggling to keep you alive, will you be able to still feel any happiness? Will you be able to feel as though your life still has a meaning, or will all semblance of meaning and happiness be lost? Thinking about these questions is unpleasant, and it makes a lot of sense why so many of us avoid them. In fact, some people are so terrified of death that it becomes a taboo subject, something they avoid talking about at all costs. But emerging evidence suggests that the fear of death might just be the root cause of some of the real dangers in our world today. Terror management theory proposes that there's a connection between the awareness of our own mortality and the ways in which we will go on to impose and force our worldviews onto others. If this theory were to be proven true, it could go on to expose that things like nationalism, terrorism, international conflicts, and racism are caused by our individual and collective awareness of mortality. There have been several hundred studies done on TMT yet thus far. The results are still a bit scattered, but one conclusion that can pretty much be safely made is that when someone is reminded of their mortality, a common coping mechanism for the terror they feel is to enter an unconscious, fear-driven state of mind. Within this fear space, people are more likely to double down on whatever attachments they have to the social, political, racial, or other cultural groups they identify with as a means of seeking comfort in community. Although these findings are extraordinarily telling about the ways in which our fears of death influence the ways we act in our lives, what they don't account for are the people who aren't afraid of death. The people who have found ways to soothe their unconscious terror from surrounding the topic of mortality and have found a way to accept it, allowing it to be instead a motivating factor for the ways they choose to live. Take Claire Wineland, for example, a girl who was born with cystic fibrosis and given about 10 years to live. Despite the tremendous pain her disease caused and having to grow up with the ever-present awareness of death looming over her shoulder, Claire spent most of her younger years playing games with nurses and elaborately decorating her hospital rooms, exploring every opportunity to feel happiness and a sense of meaning. Sadly, things became much more sinister when Claire's lungs collapsed at the age of 13, and she fell into a medically induced coma with just a 1% chance of survival. Claire miraculously emerged from the coma after 16 days, but as she came back to reality, she soon realized that the near-death experience had radically transformed her understanding of what mattered most in life. A year later, at the age of 14, Claire started a foundation called the Clarity Project to raise money for other terminally ill children with cystic fibrosis. She then spent the rest of her teenage years giving inspirational speeches filled with insights such as, "The quality of your life isn't determined by whether you're healthy or sick or rich or poor. It's determined by what you make out of your experience as a human being. And the moment you realize it's not about avoiding suffering, it's about making something from your suffering, you're incredibly free." When you listen to Claire deliver these insights, it's hard to believe that she was just a teenager at the time she said them. Her wisdom allotted her the nickname Little Buddha amongst her followers. Although Claire only lived to the age of 21, so many would say that her awareness of her mortality, combined with the near-death experience, accelerated her understanding of who she was and what she wanted to do in the world. While many of us spend our entire lives from 0 to 80 without any sense of meaning, faced with her own mortality, Claire was able to live meaningfully with the knowledge that she might not have as much time as everyone else. And Claire's story doesn't exist in a vacuum. Reports of people discovering newfound clarity about what makes their lives meaningful within terminal illness diagnosis and near-death experiences are rather common. On her experience of being diagnosed with breast cancer, Audre Lorde, an infamous American poet, writer, and activist, wrote, "In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of my mortality and of what I wished and wanted for in my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became strongly etched in a merciless light, and what I most regretted were my silences. I was gonna die, if not sooner rather than later, whether or not I had ever spoken to myself. My silences hadn't protected me. Your silence won't protect you." That message about the importance of speaking your truth rings loud and clear throughout the entirety of Lorde's book, The Cancer Journals. It also ties in perfectly with the most common regret reported by Bronnie Ware's patients. "I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me." We live in an exciting, rapidly growing, and ever-evolving world, during a time where the invention of things like the internet, virtual reality, and electric cars have created more possibilities than ever before. Every day we face an immense amount of pressure to be more successful, make more money, connect with more people, achieve larger-than-life accolades, break world records, and traverse the unknown. And yet, despite all of this, our core values and what matters most in the end have remained the same for millennia. We all want to have lived a life with a sense of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment. But despite how seemingly obvious these core values seem, the day-to-day chaos of being alive can make them quite difficult to live by. The trick to do so lies in learning how to hold these deep truths close, despite their commonality, and to continuously remember to prioritize what matters most, even in situations where doing so isn't the easiest or even the most beneficial choice. Imagine yourself lying in that hospital bed again, one last time, except now you are in your final minutes on this plane of existence. You reflect back on the pivotal moments of your life with newfound clarity, watching little snippets of memory swirl around your head like a 3D movie. While not everyone will suffer a terminal illness, all of us, in one way or another, will have to come face to face with death. Would you be happy if that moment came today? Tomorrow? 7 days from now, or even 6 months from now? If you won't, then you need to start living like you're dying.
To be alive is a miracle, but a fragile one. Our time on Earth is short and the odds are not in our favor. From universal and uncontrollable forces like aging, sickness, and an asteroid striking us, to self-made problems like climate change, robot invasions, or nuclear war, there are many different ways our story could end as a species, and in the next chapter, we're going to confront them all.
Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. From sand we came, to sand we'll return. No matter what we do, no matter how hard we try, one day we're living, the next we're clocking out for the long nap. We all know this, but still, the thought of death is extremely scary for most people. I think this is because unlike most other things in life, we don't know anything about death. We don't know when we'll die, how we'll die, or even why we die. We don't know if death is the end, or if it's only the beginning of something else. We just don't know. However, thanks to statistics and probability, we might be able to predict how we're going to die. Most of the time when we talk about death prevention, people think of locking the door to their houses, learning martial arts, or carrying around a weapon for self-defense. We try to protect ourselves from the other people who might want to harm us. But in reality, the person most likely to kill you is you. The odds of dying by suicide are significantly higher than the odds of getting murdered. Because we're always in our heads, we're always aware of all the wrong we've ever done. We become judge, jury, and executioner in our own court case, and we sentence ourselves to punishments that we don't deserve. Our mind keeps us in solitary confinement with soundproof doors so no one outside can ever hear us scream. Slowly, it drains life out until there's nothing left. With how common suicide is, it's surprising to see how some people still treat issues relating to mental health. The way we treat mental health overall has improved, yes, but there's still a long way to go. If someone came to you to tell you that they felt unsafe and they've been seeing someone around who might try to kill them, your first reaction probably wouldn't be, "Are you sure?" or "It's probably just all in your head, just don't think that way." Instead, you would probably get the person to a place where they feel safe and away from their potential attacker. So why is it that when it comes to mental health issues that are more likely to kill us, we aren't as kind to one another? We tell people to stop sulking and just be happy, as if there's a light switch in their head that they can simply click on and off to control their emotions. We tell them that they aren't being strong enough, as if they can fight the demons in their head with their bare hands. We need to start treating people in serious mental health crises the same way we would treat people that are about to get murdered. Instead of telling them to be happy or be strong, let's help get them to a place where they feel safe. Because in reality, when someone is murdered, it's a guy who opens his door and just gets shot. But when it's suicide, he is also the one who knocks. When he knocks, we need to, figuratively, lock our doors, learn martial arts, and carry around a weapon for self-defense. This can include things like taking some time off to clear your head and just breathe, doing mindfulness practices like meditation, and of course, seeking actual professional help. While we're not the ones doing the job, dying by murder is surprisingly unlikely. However, if you will get murdered, you'll most likely be killed by someone you know, rather than a stranger. Most murders are carried out with a gun. It's one of man's deadliest inventions, and to be lethal with it, you don't need to have much skill, prior training, or physical strength. You don't need to know how to shoot or need to have shot before. Just pull the trigger and you'll cause a lot of damage. This is why gun control is an issue that so many people talk about. Some people argue that bad guys are going to get guns anyway, so the good guys need to be able to own one too to protect themselves. But in reality, how do you know who's a good guy and who's a bad guy? How do you tell that a good guy who gave you a gun today won't turn out to be a bad guy tomorrow? We also don't consider the fact that there are 3 different ways a gun can kill you. You can get shot by it, it can fire by accident, or you can use it to put an end to it all yourself. If you don't own a gun, you can only die in one of these 3 ways. you can get shot. But if you do own a gun, you immediately open yourself up to the other two, increasing your odds of dying by a gunshot drastically. According to statistics from the CDC, 14,542 people died from gunshot-related homicides in 2019 alone. That number might seem like a lot. However, it pales in comparison to the number of people who died of suicide by gunshot, 23,854 people. For each time a gun is used in self-defense, it's also used in 11 suicide attempts, 7 murders and assaults, and 4 accidental fires. With stats like these, it almost makes you wonder why people want multiple weapons capable of doing things like this. Since we arrived on this planet, humans have been trying to increase their lifespan. We learned the best foods to eat for strength and rejuvenation. We learned what not to eat for a healthier life. And best of all, we created medication. We learned how to use drugs and other forms of medicine to help treat, cure, and prevent our diseases. One of the most important drugs we created are pain relievers. Our body does a very good job at healing itself. When we have a cut, a tear, or even broken bones, if given enough time, the body repairs itself with new cells and tissue. But the pain we feel before or while that healing happens can be very excruciating. With pain relievers, we can reduce this pain drastically to the point to where we can keep going on with our daily activities while the injury heals. In 1775, opioids became a legal pain-relieving medicine, and in the 1860s, it was used to treat troops during the Civil War. However, something unexpected happened. Many of the soldiers that were treated with opioids became addicted to them, and in that moment, what was designed to heal us would soon also be able to kill us. Today, opioid overdoses account for 1 in 92 deaths in America. You are more likely to die from an opioid overdose than you are to die from a car crash, a gunshot, fire or smoke, or even a natural disaster. In New York alone, about 3,000 people die yearly from an opioid overdose. Now I'm sure you're wondering, if this stuff is so lethal, why is it still so easily accessible? Well, if you don't already know, Big Pharma is used to collectively describe the global pharmaceutical industry. They're responsible for producing our medicine, which is a good thing. But these are companies, and companies are designed to make the most money, not for the general good of the public. Opioids tend to make a lot of money, so they convince everyone that opioids are essential, even though there are non-opioid painkillers that are much safer and not as addictive. But there's still more. Diseases like diabetes and HIV are deadly killers when mismanaged, but when properly managed with the right medication, people can lead a long and relatively healthy life even with them. However, this medication is extremely expensive for most people. Currently, it is estimated that 463 million people are living with diabetes all over the world. But unfortunately, a lot of these people are going to die because they simply cannot afford insulin. If you live in America, you don't have to worry about HIV as much. However, if you live in sub-Saharan Africa, you are at more risk. If you live in Eswatini, whose population is 27% HIV positive, you might want to be extra careful on whose bed you lie. As an American, however, there is one thing that you definitely need to worry about: obesity. If you're an American adult watching this video right now, there's a 1 in 3 chance that you're medically obese. Obesity is an American epidemic that isn't talked about enough. Well, it is, but most people tend to just shrug it off. With a predominantly sugary diet and the biggest fast food chains in the world, it's not surprising that over 36% of Americans are obese. And obesity isn't just a cosmetic concern. It puts you at risk of health problems, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, and even cancer. Obesity is generally caused by eating too much and moving too little. So you would think eating too little and moving too much should solve the issue. And while for the most part it does, if you do this, you're going to die of nutritional deficiencies. Although a lot more attention is given to obesity, obesity and nutritional deficiencies cause almost the same number of deaths. In 2017, 7,740 people in America died of obesity. In the same year, 7,846 people died from nutritional deficiencies. Nutritional deficiencies are sometimes caused by eating disorders like anorexia. Although they can affect anyone, As a young woman, you are most at risk. This is in part because the world promotes being thin, when, in reality, being extremely slim and being extremely obese are equally dangerous. Accidents happen, and usually there's nothing we can do about it. And for some of us, that's sadly the way we're going to die. Whether it's a motor vehicle accident, simply falling on the ground to your death, or accidental poisoning. Most of the time, there's really nothing we can do to prevent these accidents. Yes, we can try to be safe, but sometimes things simply don't work out the way they're supposed to, and we come crashing to the ground. However, sometimes these accidents are not completely accidental. If you drink and drive, that's most likely how you're going to die. Technically, it will be described as an accident, but it would have been a very preventable one. Every one of us has a 1 in 3 chance of being involved in a drink and drive accident, whether as drivers or passengers. If you don't want to end up as a statistic, always make sure that you have a designated driver or order an Uber when you go out for a night of drinking. While dying in a drinking and driving accident is easily preventable, the thing that's most likely to kill you isn't. Cancer. Just as there's a 1 in 3 chance that you'll be involved in a drunk driving accident, there's also a 1 in 3 chance that you'll be diagnosed with cancer in your lifetime. This isn't very surprising considering the fact that there are just so many different types of cancer and none of them are completely preventable. It's true that things like a healthy diet and exercise can reduce your chances, but it doesn't completely eliminate them. And for the most part, this is true for death in general. We can try our best to protect ourselves and be safe, but when it comes knocking, sometimes all we can do is open the door and be ready to be taken. Life isn't fair. If it was, we would all be born with the same genes, predisposed to the same diseases and health risk factors. But we're not. Diseases can be hereditary, and straight from our mother's wombs, we're simply born to die. HIV, sickle cell anemia, high blood pressure. Sometimes we simply inherit these diseases that make us more likely to die than the next person the moment we're born. High blood pressure is one of the deadliest inherited diseases because it exposes us to the biggest killer in the world, heart disease. 1 in every 4 deaths is caused by heart disease. If you smoke or have high cholesterol, this is most likely how you're going to die. Heart disease, for the most part, is preventable. But with things like poverty not giving people the opportunity to have the most nutritious meals they can, it's really difficult. When you think about it, it actually makes sense. The heart is the center of our lives, so we're most likely going to die when it's not functioning properly, which is why exercise and a healthy diet is always encouraged. For all your heart does for you, it deserves to be treated right. If you're saddened about how likely and unpreventable your death is, don't be. Things have actually been getting much better. Between 2000 and 2019, the global life expectancy increased by more than 6 years, and it's still going up. Modern day medicine is getting better, mortality rates are going down, and we're living much better than we used to. No matter how old you are watching this video right now, in a way, you've already lived a full life. If you lived in the Victorian era, which is just less than 200 years ago, you would have had a 1 in 3 chance of dying before you even turned 5. So live. Enjoy life to its fullest. Life is so fleeting, so take time to pause and reflect. Be thankful for what you have and hopeful for what's to come. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. From sand we came, to sand we'll return. No matter what we do, no matter how hard we try. One day we live, and the next, we die. The thought of death scares many people, and understandably so. It's something that can happen anytime, anywhere, but living in fear of it is no way to live. We all have limited time on Earth, and we need to make the most of it. So instead of worrying about what happens once you're no longer around, preparing for that worst case scenario now might be able to help give you the peace of mind you're looking for. And to do that, Lemonade is here to help. Now, I get it. Not everyone wants to think about even needing life insurance. It's scary. But preparing for tomorrow today can help future-proof your family in case of your untimely death. If you're the breadwinner in your household, life insurance can help with the financial protection of your partner or kids. Or maybe you're a parent with a really smart kid who might want to go to college in the future. If something were to happen, you can rest easy at night knowing you've done what you can to help take care of them. Applying for term life insurance is a 100% digital experience. You can do it on your terms, wherever you are. Starting at just $9 a month, it's some of the most affordable term life insurance on the market. You can apply to get up to 30 years in coverage in as little as 5 minutes by visiting lemonade.com/aperture. Your future self will thank you, you'll sleep better at night, and you'll be supporting my channel at the same time. New York City, one of the United States' most recognizable cities. In September 2020, one of the many artistic landmarks of the city was repurposed. It was the Metronome near Union Square. If you've ever walked by it or have seen it online, you'll probably notice two things. One, a giant piece of artwork by Kristen Jones and Andrew Ginsel that is supposed to convey instancy and infinity, transience and permanence all at once, while the pulsing nature of the artwork is supposed to embody the city's energy, elements such as the massive piece of bedrock symbolizing millennia of geological history, and the rippling centerpiece all come together to help the viewer visualize one thing: time. Another thing you might notice is the nearly 60 feet long display of digits. This digital facet of the artwork is what allows it to be reprogrammed to fit such an occasion. Previously, it was used to display the time of the day and the number of hours, minutes, and seconds that remain in it. It is all fittingly titled The Passage. But this September, this artwork embarked on a new mission. The numbers changed to not display only the regular time, but the time that Earth has left in our carbon budget before, given the current rate of emissions, we crossed the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold outlined by the IPCC in 2018. Now, it all sounds like things people have heard before. Scientists come up with numbers, they urge how important it is, and then people move on with their days. This is different. A complete depletion would result in a total destruction of our planet, and it will have been at the fault of our own hands. If the Earth's temperature is increased by just 1.5 degrees Celsius, we will feel its consequences. Extreme heat waves, fire across the world, droughts in places there shouldn't be, and less of the one resource on Earth we all need: water. The concern for climate change is certainly nothing new. In fact, it's been with us not for just the past few decades, but for centuries. British archaeologist Ian Morris spoke at the World Economic Forum to talk about how civilizations in the past had collapsed. He incorporated modern-day scientific methods, excavation practices, and billions of artifacts to dissect the collapse of previous civilizations. He concludes by saying that all major collapses tend to have 5 common factors, time and time again. Firstly, they tend to have massive, uncontrolled population movements that overwhelm societal infrastructures. Pretty much overpopulation. Secondly, they have major pandemics and diseases, which, because of the population movements, spread and merge faster. Then there's state failure and increased warfare. This in turn leads to an economic collapse. And then there's one final piece of the puzzle: climate change. Civilizations rarely collapse because of one thing. And so, these 5 factors can often co-occur, and it's their combined effect that leads to the collapse of civilization. It's easy to see how these factors connect with each other, because all of these things are taking place right now around the world. Climate change is displacing millions of people, a pandemic is ravaging the world as we speak, and bad governance about these issues is making it all worse. And while the population growth is certainly not out of control, it is, in fact, declining steadily. All in all, we're well on our way to collapsing. Ian Morris says there is some hope, however. In fact, in his study of past civilizations, he notes that quite a few actually survived the 5 horsemen of the apocalypse and rebuilt themselves afterwards. He credits their survival to economic growth. Now, I'm really not about to debate capitalism versus other economic models in the world, because, well, I don't want to start a war. In his book about the future of human civilization, Homo Deus, historian Yuval Noah Harari notes that, although we experience occasional economic crises and international wars, in the long run, capitalism has not only managed to prevail, but also to overcome famine, plague, and war. In fact, in modern times, we've experienced so much economic growth that today more people die of eating too much than eating not enough. It turns out, we have a little too much stuff sometimes, and that too much stuff isn't produced out of nothing. Beyond the dollar value we pay for things, there's a far greater cost to abundance, an ecological cost. The overuse of unsustainable natural resources, water pollution, soil pollution, loss of biodiversity in recent times has meant that we are closer to ecological collapse than we have ever been. Even though in the past there wasn't a global governing body like the United Nations to oversee and recommend actions to reduce our environmental footprint, the footprint itself was always very localized. People hardly traveled as far as we do today, and business was not nearly as robust. Sure, a few centuries ago, there were no solar panels or recycled plastic, but there also weren't any fuel-hungry airliners either. We also weren't siphoning oil and fossil fuels out of the ground either. The scale of the industrial world, it seems, is truly unique to our time and civilization. There are, of course, other aspects to our civilization that make it more unique, and, by extension, more complicated. Total nuclear obliteration is still a non-zero possibility, and as low as that number might be, the simple possibility of something like that happening is terrifying. Both natural pandemics and bioweapons are also a threat. In fact, both are quite common throughout the history of collapsed civilizations. Until very recently, more soldiers died from disease than from actual combat itself. It's just that modern advances, while allowing us to cure far more diseases than before, have also opened up a Pandora's box of future threats. There's obviously the threat of runaway superintelligence as well. Such a technological singularity can encompass the threat of nanotechnology, and their rising incorporation into everything from manufacturing to medicine. All of these factors understandably complicate the modern infrastructure, and Joseph Tainer, a historian, suggests that this rising complexity is what could ultimately be our society's downfall. He suggests that societies emerge as problem-solving collectives, that's what they're there for. But eventually, they reach a point where the complexity and intricate structures required to solve problems actually reach a point of diminishing returns, and civilizations collapse under their own weight. Tied to this idea is that of energy return on investment, or EROI for short. Simply put, it's how much energy is needed to produce or extract a set amount of energy. Fossil fuels have historically had good EROIs, but as we're burning through tons and tons of non-renewable fossil fuels, this EROI is steadily declining. The EROI for petroleum, for example, has fallen by around 10 times in the past century, because, well, we're stealing all of it. Besides, despite being more in line with our goals of a greener future, as it stands, renewable energy sources are quite hard to develop, manufacture, and implement, which doesn't help their EROIs either. These are all factors that are truly unique to our time, and they sound pretty complex. However, there is one factor that civilizations in the past have certainly never had before: social media. It's unique in the sense that there's never been a platform that allows us to connect with so many people so easily. It's a society within our society. One we certainly didn't evolve to live in. It was just a byproduct of other advances. Of course, social media has led to some wonderful things, like every other element I just talked about. It's allowed lost families to reconnect, allowed fundraisers to reach significantly larger audiences, and it's given a platform to the ordinary person. But the problem with social media, well, it's much more nuanced. Much like the cost of biological advancements, there's the threat of virality in social media too, only it's much, much worse. If falsehood spreads 6 times faster than truth on Twitter, then there's only ever going to be one winner in the battle of ideas. The virality of ideas, or bad ideas I should say, is a newfound threat to civilization. It means the ripple effect of a bad idea is now much more likely to escape the geographic confines in which it took place and affect the rest of the world. The sharing of misinformation on social media has led to levels of polarization that have never been seen before. Lack of tolerance seems to be at an all-time high. You see, one of the psychological side effects of prolonged social media is a broken concentration. You could argue that that's less of a side effect and more of an objective. Regardless, people are constantly glancing at their phones no matter what they're doing, and it's turning them into short-sighted individuals who are preoccupied with the next burst of dopamine. That is exactly the problem we're facing with climate change and ecological collapse. We now have a world that is unwilling to look beyond the next presidency or the next election or the next generation or two. Social media, in this case, might just be a good analogy. But the fact of the matter is, we are slowly but surely walking towards the collapse of civilization as we know it. Now, while an asteroid strike or an alien invasion is a more spectacular possibility, they're not nearly as likely as, say, a slow ecological collapse. A popular saying goes, civilization may not end with a bang, but with a whimper. The moral imperative to do something really presents itself when you think about the number of lives that will eventually be affected by climate change, ecological collapse, or another factor that might cause societal collapse. The number of people presently alive pales in comparison to the number of people that can be alive in the future, on this very planet, at least as long as the sun isn't too close. That number skyrockets once you factor in the possibility that, given enough time, civilization could become multiplanetary. But that's the thing, enough time. We barely have enough time to think about the policies of today, let alone tomorrow. Think about this. A man named Danny Hillis invented the idea of a 10,000-year clock in 1984 with one singular purpose: to encourage long-term thinking. As the name suggests, this clock will continue ticking, without human intervention, for 10,000 years when construction is complete. Much like the metronome near Union Square, this clock reminds us of time, albeit in a different way. This clock is not necessarily counting down from something, but by its sheer presence, its sheer scale, it serves to remind us that the world will go on long after we've passed. And as such, we can still have an impact. Who knows, maybe under thousands of layers of sediment and fossilized remains, there could lie buried another civilization exactly like ours, at this exact stage of their journey. Their time had come. 7 years, 36 days. The passage ticks away, second by second, to remind us that ours will too.
It could be terrible, and it could be great. It's not clear.
Right.
But one thing is for sure, we will not control it.
Go is arguably the most complex board game in existence. Its goal is simple: surround more territory than your opponent. This game has been played by humans for the past 2,500 years and is thought to be the oldest board game still being played today. However, it's not only humans that are playing this game now. In 2016, Google DeepMind's AlphaGo beat 18-time world champion Lee Sedol in 4 out of 5 games. Now, normally a computer beating a human at a game like chess or checkers wouldn't be that impressive, but Go is different. Go cannot be solved by brute force. Go cannot be predicted. There are over 10 to the 170 moves possible in Go. To put that into perspective, there are only 10 to the 80 atoms in the observable universe. AlphaGo was trained using data from real human Go games. It ran through millions of games and learned the techniques used and even made up new ones that no one had ever seen. And this is very impressive alone. However, what many people don't know is that only a year after AlphaGo's victory over Lee Sedol, a brand new AI called AlphaGo Zero beat the original AlphaGo. Not in 4 out of 5 games, not in 5 out of 5 games, not in 10 out of 10 games, but beat AlphaGo 100 to 0, 100 games in a row. The most impressive part? It learned how to play with zero human interaction. This technique is more powerful than any previous version. Why? It isn't restricted to human knowledge. No data was given, no historical figures were given. With just the bare bones rules, AlphaGo Zero surpassed the previous AlphaGo in only 40 days of learning. In only 40 days, it surpassed over 2,500 years of strategy and knowledge. It only played against itself and is now regarded as the best Go player in the world, even though it isn't human. But wait, if this AI learned how to play without any human interaction, made up strategies of its own, and then beat us with those strategies, then that means there's more non-human knowledge about Go than there is human. And if we continue to develop artificial intelligence, then that means there's going to be more and more non-human intelligence. Eventually, there's going to be a point where we represent the minority of intelligence, maybe even a very minuscule amount. That's fine though, we can just turn it off, right? It's a thought, but think. When modern day humans began to take over the planet, why didn't the chimps and Neanderthals turn us off? If this artificial intelligence becomes super intelligent and learns through and is connected to the internet, well, we can't just shut down the entire internet, there's no off switch. So what happens if we end up stuck with AI that is constantly and exponentially getting smarter than we are? What if it gets to a point that us humans get in the way, and the AI hits the off switch on humanity? When people think of AI, they tend to think of super intelligent AI. AI that serves the human race but could also end us at a moment's notice. But is this really going to happen? Pop culture, mostly movies, tend to depict AI not as benevolent creations, but rather as robots with a malicious intent. Except for Tars in Interstellar, he's pretty cool.
Yeah, you can use it to find your way back into the ship after I blow you out the airlock.
There's a lot more to AI than you might think. There's a lot more types that serve different purposes. Artificial narrow intelligence, also known as weak AI, is the only form of artificial intelligence that humanity has created so far. It makes this sound kind of bad, but trust me, it does a really good job at what it's supposed to do. Narrow AI is AI that is created for the sole purpose of handling one task. It's the kind of AI that AlphaGo is. Narrow AI is good at speech and image recognition, and also at playing games like chess or Go, or even pretty complex games like Dota 2. At the International 2017 World Championship, OpenAI's artificial intelligence destroyed pro player Dendy 2-0. But much like AlphaGo Zero, it wasn't taught how to play the game. It played out millions of years worth of 1 versus 1 matches against itself and learned on its own. It started out barely knowing how to walk, and eventually as time went on, it surpassed human level skill. If you use Spotify, you'll see that it creates daily mixes for you based on the music you listen to. Amazon learns from it, teaches itself your buying habits to suggest you new products. But it seems like a common reoccurrence where these AI teach themselves how to do the task at hand. How is that even possible? Well, through something called machine learning. Machine learning is the science of trying to get computers to learn and think like we humans do. Machine learning is essentially the same way that babies learn. We start off as small screaming sacks of meat, but over time, we improve our learning. We take in more data and more information from observations and interactions, and most of the time we end up pretty smart. The most popular technique out there to make a computer mimic a human brain is known as a neural network. Our brains are pretty good at solving problems, but each neuron in your brain is only responsible for solving a very minuscule part of any problem. Think of it like an assembly line, where each neuron in your brain has a certain job to do in order to completely solve a problem. Let's make a simple example of a neural network. In order to say that someone is alive, they have to either have a pulse or they must be breathing, but not necessarily both at the same time. This yellow dot represents a neuron in a neural network. It functions just like a neuron in your brain does. It takes in information and then gives an output. If this neuron takes in the information that says, hey, this person has a pulse and is breathing, then the neuron deciphers this information and says, okay, this person is alive. It learns to analyze situations where the human would be declared alive, if it's breathing or has a pulse, and situations where the human would be dead, where neither of those is true. That's essentially a bare-bones explanation of how it works. Of course, no neural network is really this simple. Many have millions of parameters and are much more complex than just this one-layer network. The world is full of sounds and visuals and just data in general, and we take in all of this to form our view of reality. However, as more and more complex topics show up with more and more data, it becomes harder and harder for humans to do this analysis on their own. This is where machine learning comes in handy. Machines can not only analyze data given to it, but also learn from it and adapt its own view of it. Let's go back to AlphaGo Zero. In only 40 days, it surpassed thousands of years of strategy and knowledge and even made up some of its own strategies. But how did it do all of this so quickly? Biological neurons in your brain operate at about 200 Hz. That's proved to be fine for us, but modern transistors operate at over 2 GHz, an entire order of magnitude faster. Those neurons in your brain travel through what are known as axons, and they travel at about 100 meters per second, which is pretty fast and gives us pretty good reaction time. But it's only about a third as fast as the speed of sound. Computers, however, can transmit information at the speed of light, or 300 million meters per second. So there's quite a big difference between our brain's capabilities and a computer's. In just 1 week, a computer can do 20,000 years worth of human-level research or simulations or anything it is trained to do. A brain has to fit inside your head. There's a limit to how much space it can take up, but a computer could fill an entire room or even an entire building. Now obviously weak AI doesn't require an entire server room to run. Like we saw with OpenAI, it only took a USB stick. But for more intelligent AI, it may require much more power. Artificial General Intelligence, or AGI, is AI with more than a single purpose. AGI is almost at or equal to human-level intelligence, And this is where we're trying to get to. But there's a problem. The more we search into it, the harder and harder it seems to be able to achieve. Think about how you perceive things. When someone asks you a complicated question, you have to sort through a ton of unrelated thoughts and observations and articulate a concise response to that question. This isn't exactly the easiest thing for a computer to achieve. See, humans aren't able to process information at the speed of light like computers can, but we can plan things. We can think of smart ways to solve problems without having to brute force through every option. Getting a computer to human-level thinking is hard. We humans can create things, we invent things. We create societies and play games and laugh. These are all very hard things to teach a computer. How can you teach a computer to create something that doesn't exist or hasn't even been thought of? And what would be its incentive to do so? I believe AGI, or strong AI, is the most important artificial intelligence to be created, and here's why. Machine learning is exponential, meaning that it starts off rather slow, but there's a certain tipping point where things start to speed up drastically. The difference between weak AI and strong AI is millions of times larger than the difference between strong AI and super intelligent AI. Once we have the artificial general intelligence that can function like a human being, for the most part at least, it may help us reach super intelligence level in only a few months, or perhaps even weeks. But here comes another big problem. See, many people tend to see intelligence on a graph like this. We have maybe an ant here, a mouse at about here, the average human here, and maybe Einstein right here just above. If you asked most people where a super intelligent AI would lie on this graph, most would probably put it somewhere around here. But this just isn't the case. Although AI might not be at human level intelligence yet, it will be one day, and it won't stop at human level. It'll most likely just zoom past and continue getting on more and more advanced until, eventually, the graph looks something like this. This is what is known as the technological singularity, where artificial intelligence becomes so advanced to the point where there's an extreme explosion of new knowledge and information, some that might not even be able to be understood by humans. If we make a super intelligent AI, that AI would be able to improve upon itself, and in turn get smarter in a shorter amount of time, which means that this new and improved AI could do the same thing. It continues to repeat this process, doing it faster and faster each time. The first recreation may take a month, the second a week, a third a day, and this keeps going until it's billions of times smarter than all of humanity. Compared to chimps, we share about 96% of their DNA. We are 96% chimp, but in that little 4%, we went from being extremely hairy and mediocre primates to a species that has left the planet. We're a species that plans to colonize Mars, a species that made missiles and millions of inventions, all compacted down into that 4% DNA difference. The number of genetic differences between a human and a chimp is 10 times smaller than the genetic difference between a mouse and a rat, but yet only being 4% different from them, their entire fate seems to lie in our hands. If we want to, for some reason, put a McDonald's on a chimpanzee habitat, we just do it, we don't ask. There are 5.5 quadrillion ants on the Earth. Ants outnumber us 1 million to 1, and yet we actually live like they don't exist at all. If we see one crawling on a table, we just smush it and move on with our day. What happens when the day comes where AI becomes the humans in this situation, and we become the ants? Super intelligent AI is different from software we know today. We tend to think our software is something that we program and the computer will follow our rules. But with highly advanced AI and through machine learning, the AI teaches itself how and what life is, as well as how to improve it. After a while, there is no need for any human interaction. Perhaps humans would even slow it down as opposed to speeding it up. We have to be careful about how we make it. As Sam Harris has stated,
and the first thing you want to do is not give it access to the internet, right? You're just going to cage this thing, right? So because you don't want it to get out, right? So, but you want to tempt it. You want to see if it's trying to get out. How do you know whether it is? So this is called a honeypot strategy, where you tempt it to make certain moves in the direction of acquiring more power.
For example, if we're somehow able to give a super intelligent AI orders and it follows those orders, it may just take the quickest and easiest route to solve them. Just because we make a super intelligent AI, that doesn't mean that it's going to be wise. See, there's a difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence is more about making mistakes and acquiring knowledge and being able to solve problems through that. Wisdom, on the other hand, is about applying the correct knowledge in the most efficient way. Wisdom is being able to see beyond the intelligence gained and being able to apply that to other things, in hopefully a productive way. If we give AI an order to solve world hunger, well, the easiest way to solve world hunger is just to kill all life on the planet, and then nothing would ever be hungry again. But obviously that isn't what we want. We would have to somehow teach the AI to have human-like values, a moral code to follow, and somehow work around that. In a way, we'd want it to be like a super intelligent human cyborg. You may not even realize it, but the majority of humans are already cyborgs. Humans are already becoming less biological and more technical. We already put our minds onto non-biological things. How? Well, many of you are watching this video on that device right now. Phones. Your phone has become an extension of yourself. It can answer any question you could ever ask at a moment's notice. There's only one problem though. Your inputs are just too slow. If we were able to create a high bandwidth link between the brain and the internet, we would be literally connected to everyone and everything on the entire planet. This is what Neuralink is aiming to do. Create what is known as a neural lace. Your brain has two big systems, your limbic system and your cortex, and these two are in a relationship with each other. Your limbic system is responsible for your basic emotions, your survival instinct. Your cortex is responsible for your problem-solving skills, your critical thinking. Neuralink is aiming to create a third layer to this. The AI would be like a third wheel in this relationship, but would increase our capabilities by multiple orders of magnitude. We all would have eidetic memories, picture-perfect memory. We would have access to all the information available to the world and be able to access it instantly. With the addition of this third layer, people may eventually realize that they like this newfound knowledge and way of living more than the alternative, more than living without this newfound AI that has been installed into them. Eventually, people may decide to ditch their human body, their biological self, in favor of the artificial world. This, of course, is a long ways away, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't think about it. There are of course many problems and counter-arguments that come up, and I'll address some of them now. For starters, how do we program something like consciousness? We don't even know what it is yet. How do we program something like a limbic system into a machine? Something that has a sense of fear, perhaps even a fear of death? Can a machine or an AI really love someone or show that emotion? Because if it can love, it can also hate, which could raise big problems for us in the future. This is a fear of many people when the idea of superintelligent AI is brought up. The biggest and most pressing question is, will it be pleasant or will it be hateful? Could it even be either of those things in the first place, and more importantly, is it even necessary? Sure, a superintelligent AI would have all the information in the world at its disposal, but then again, so do you and I. So do all of the people in the world with very radical views. Who's to say that a superintelligent AI wouldn't adopt these views as its own, and then decide to execute on those instead of what we had planned? Sure, it's possible that a superintelligent AI could improve upon itself using knowledge it gained, but then again, it isn't pulling random improvements out of thin air. It's not just going to unite quantum mechanics and general relativity with raw mathematics. What if some of its upgrades needed experiments to be run? What if it needs more information? Is it just going to make it up? This leads into, what if the AI learned to lie, and then decides to lie to us about its accomplishments for its own selfish reasons? It's also possible that the progress of computing will slow down, and it looks like it already is. I mean, look at airplanes. In the past 100 years we went from this to this. But like many things, there's a threshold that is hard to get past. But if we do get past this barrier, the upsides could be tremendous. It's almost obvious that superintelligent AI has the capability of making humanity billions of times better than it is today. But on the flip side, it could also be used as a weapon. Just think, like I said before, if this thing is running for a week and has access to all of the world's information, it could make over 20,000 years of technological progress. You let this thing run for 6 months, and you could potentially have 500,000 years or even more of technological progress. Imagine if this got into the wrong hands, and imagine the repercussions it would have. When you Google something, not only are you giving out data and telling a potential artificial intelligence what you're thinking, you're also telling it how you're thinking. We feed it all of our questions, all of our answers. If we were going to try and program a limbic system into an AI, we would be teaching an artificial intelligence what we're afraid of. Out of all the data in the world, over 90% of it has been created in the past 3 years. AI learned how to recognize faces. It learned how to recognize voices. It learns languages and then will eventually translate between them all seamlessly. This knowledge and information train could continue until it has went through all 100% of this data. This is why artificial intelligence is such an important topic. Superintelligent AI is the last invention that humanity will ever make. Once it's invented, it can't be uninvented. The technology and developments that could possibly turn the human species into immortal, godlike figures is coincidentally the same technology that could also cause the downfall of humanity. Many people are resistant to the AI because they fear it may have some of the negative traits that we humans do. It may be greedy, it may lie, it may be selfish, it may be rebellious, it may be short-tempered. The power of superintelligent AI is there, patiently waiting to be found. But the question is, do we actually want to find it?
We've faced the end of the world, the end of humanity, the end of you, but this is only the end of what we know. What we don't know is what happens after. Every culture and every religion has different interpretations and depictions of what happens. Do we simply vanish? Get reincarnated? Or is there something waiting for us beyond the veil? In this final chapter, we open the door to the unknown, the world beyond, the afterlife.
We've had to talk about death a lot in the past few years, whether it's referring to the number of casualties in a war or as the number of victims of a virus. Although we primarily discuss it within the context of our society, we understandably still keep death at arm's length. This is a coping mechanism to keep us going. If we dwell on the thoughts of our morality too much, it can consume us and prevent us from going about our daily lives. What is the point of life if it all just simply ends? When we sit with the prospect of our own end, it often fills us with anxiety. It overwhelms us with questions about the prospect of finality. What happens when your brain shuts down? Will it be a heavenly release or will it feel more like torture? Is it nothingness, and if it is, what does that even feel like? We don't have any experience of this potential nothing to draw on. Most of us wish deep down that we could just go on. We hope that there's some kind of experience after death. We want our consciousness to continue in the same way. We don't want to be separated from loved ones for eternity. But is there any connection between our intense desire to go on and some spiritual truth? Is there life after death? In recent decades, how we think about consciousness and dying from a scientific perspective has changed significantly. New research on what happens when you die has challenged many assumptions about our notion of death. When your life ends, your heart stops beating and your lungs stop working. Your brain is no longer receiving oxygen and normal brain activity stops. You are technically dead. But people have survived past this point. According to several studies, 1 in 10 people claim to have had a conscious experience while they were non-responsive. We call them near-death experiences because we believe that what is truly dead will remain dead. In reality, at least according to all our current definitions of the concept, it would be more accurate to describe these as back-from-death experiences. Semantics aside, these are remarkably similar among those who recall them after resuscitation. They often involve visions of traveling through a tunnel. Some claim to have had an out-of-body experience or see their whole life flash before their eyes. They meet spirits or familiar persons that speak with them. Many report a strong sense of peacefulness and ease, which should bring comfort to those of us who are particularly anxious about death. But what exactly is going on in that dying brain? If a person flatlined, they shouldn't be aware of anything at all. Is it possible they're experiencing consciousness without a functioning brain? Chima Borjigin, a professor of neurology at Michigan State University, studied the record of electrical activity in the brains of women who were just taken off life support. What she discovered is changing how we all think about the dead. Her findings? Death shouldn't be considered at a point in time, but rather a process. The organs don't immediately fail. The heart can be restarted and full brain function can return. The dying process is sometimes reversible. Hours after someone has been pronounced clinically dead, they can, in rare circumstances, be resuscitated. These instances are not a divine miracle, just a result of death being a much slower process than we think. In one infamous 2008 case, 59-year-old Velma Thomas was clinically dead for 17 hours. 10 minutes after being taken off a ventilator with her body being prepped for organ removal for transplantation, she woke up. She was alert and immediately asked for her son. The claim up until recently has been that there's no brain activity between cardiac arrest and resuscitation or the period after someone flatlines. For near-death experiences to take place, they have to happen in this period. There has to be a conscious experience. When Borjagen looked at a dying brain, she saw that it was surging with high-frequency electrical signals, known as gamma waves. The areas in the brain associated with consciousness were incredibly lively. When oxygen was cut off, the brain waves synchronized in a way usually associated with heightened attention and memory. Areas of the brain that are active when we're conscious and awake were communicating with areas connected to memory formation. One hypothesis is that the system that filters different brain functions goes offline when a person is dying, giving them access to their entire consciousness all at once. This would explain why people often see their lives flash before their eyes and remember things that happened when they had no active memory. Do you remember everything from your toddler years? That's what we're talking about here. So what does this say about the brain and consciousness? Does this new insight suggest that the physical brain isn't necessary for a conscious experience, or that the brain is just very resilient when it comes to oxygen deprivation? It could just be the body's attempt to keep itself going for as long as possible, in case the heart and lungs resume functioning again. There's a lot more to be discovered about consciousness and the dying brain as the scientific horizons of its functionality continue to evolve. For now, there's one thing we should start doing differently for those who are pronounced dead. It's something you might be compelled to do anyway in a state of grief. When we sit with the dead, we should speak to them. We know that there's brain activity after cardiac arrest and that the mind potentially has some awareness of the space around it. Patients who have been resuscitated sometimes describe out-of-body experiences and are able to detail things around them they wouldn't have had access to while in a conscious state. They hear what those around them have been saying. In one instance, a woman described a shoe placed on a nearby window ledge that she wouldn't have been able to see from her hospital room. If we speak to the dead, they may be able to hear us. I think there's something comforting about the idea of sending a last message to your loved one, even if they're unable to respond in kind. It's not always possible to be in the room when someone important to us dies. You could consider it an opportunity to say something important you never got a chance to tell them. But what do you say exactly? Do we tell them we love them? Do we share memories? Do we show strength or weakness? Should we be philosophical or spiritual? You may have heard of Bardo Thodol, otherwise known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It's a popular text about the experience of dying from a Buddhist perspective, specifically Tibetan Buddhism. It's a book like no other for one obvious reason. It's intended to be read to those who have passed on. It's also meant to be read in advance to prepare oneself for death. The myth surrounding the text is that it was written in the 8th century by a Buddhist mystic named Pamukkasumbhava. He didn't write anything down himself. He dictated the book to a princess, Yeshi Sokol, who is believed to be the first Tibetan to achieve enlightenment. As the story goes, Pamukkasumbhava didn't believe that the book was right for his time, so he hid the text in a cave in Tibet. He prophesied that it would be discovered 500 years later, and in 1341, a boy named Karma Lingpa found it by following instructions from a dream he had the night before. It was a dark time in history as the Black Death swept across Asia and Europe, making the text highly relevant. The Tibetan Book of the Dead promises that death isn't just the end of consciousness, but an opportunity. During the period after death, reciting the text is intended to give the deceased a more favorable rebirth. This isn't a life filled with riches, but one that's more conducive to ending the cycle of rebirth and achieving nirvana. In Tibetan Buddhism, the cycle of birth, suffering, death, and then rebirth is endless unless we do something about it. We need to become Buddha-like to liberate ourselves. This involves ending the primary sources of suffering within us, those being craving and clinging. Through living ethically and training the mind like the Buddha, we can put an end to craving, clinging, and ultimately our suffering. We become like the Buddha and the end cycle of rebirth. And if we don't nail Buddhahood in this life, there's always the next one. About 15 years ago, 4-year-old Ryan Hammonds would spend hours directing imaginary movies in his room. He was a creative and imaginative boy. Around the same period in time, Ryan would get night terrors. He'd wake up clutching his chest, claiming that his heart burst in a dream that took place in, of all places, Hollywood. Shortly after some of these night terrors, Ryan claimed something extraordinary. He told his mother that he used to be someone else. He had a white house with a pool in Hollywood. Ryan insisted that he had 3 sons but was very distressed when he couldn't remember their names. His mother grabbed some books about Hollywood from the library filled with pictures from film productions, and flipping through the pages the boy recognized a man, immediately referring to him as George. He was right about the name. The man Ryan pointed to was an actor named George Raft, a forgotten movie star from the 1930s. Ryan also pointed to another man near George, and with excitement, Ryan insisted that he had found himself. He found the man he used to be. With the help of University of Virginia psychologist Jim Tucker, the family identified the man in the photo as Martin Martin. They were able to confirm that he did have 3 sons as well as a daughter. The daughter agreed to meet Tucker and Ryan, where they were able to confirm numerous other details about his life, such as his career dancing in New York and his work as a Hollywood agent. There are thousands of documented stories of kids roughly between the ages of 2 and 5 claiming to remember their past lives. On numerous occasions, children and their parents have been able to confirm the identity of their supposed past life in many details of their than others. This phenomenon has been studied mostly by a small group of psychologists led by Tucker's 20 years of experience and 2,500 cases. While they have the evidence that this hints towards the validity of the claims, they can't exactly prove reincarnation either. Tucker made a rough hypothesis on how reincarnation could be explained using quantum physics. That the material world may be derived from consciousness. This would suggest that consciousness doesn't require a world to exist, or a living brain. It could continue after death onto the brain of another mind. A problem with this theory is that the observer effect doesn't require consciousness to alter the observation. Making the leap to suggest that the world could be dependent on consciousness would need more evidence. It's only fair to treat the notion of past lives with skepticism. It seems unlikely that these are elaborate hoaxes, as the adults involved don't really get anything out of it by coming forward. Most of the families are also reluctant to seek help to begin with and wish to remain anonymous. It's impossible to say how far wishful thinking can drive things such as these. The truth is, we're drawn to the idea of consciousness continuing because we fear its permanent end. It's just so hard for us to grasp a life without a perspective. Non-existence makes little sense to an existing being. As exciting as the idea of rebirth is, it still doesn't give relief to the heaviest burden of death: separation. Even if there is some truth to the stories of past lives, the burden of death is still heavy. We ultimately have to say goodbye. Our clinging to others inevitably leads to pain. When the children who remember past lives get older, they tend to move on from these memories. They bring them up less and less, and eventually, they forget them. When Ryan met the daughter of Martin Martin, he was struck with how her energy had changed. He became quite shy around her. After their meeting, Ryan was less interested in his past life. In the Tibetan book, isn't intended to excite us with the prospect of more life, but the possibility of escaping it. Regardless of what perspective you view life, death is an opportunity. Think about the life you want to flash before your eyes in your final moments, and live that life today.
And now, we've reached the end, or maybe just the beginning. We've witnessed the birth of the universe, the rise of life, the fleeting blink of a human lifetime, and the slow, quiet approach of death. But in all of it, there's something undeniably beautiful, that we're here at all. That we get to ask these questions, feel these things, and wonder what it all means. We are the universe becoming aware of itself, even if it's just for a moment. And maybe that moment is enough.
The entire universe, every electron, proton, atom, every star and galaxy,